Okay, so now, finally, we're bringing it back to something Parfit talked about earlier, which is the self-interest theory, which he called S in earlier chapters, and here he just calls the self-interest theory and makes no mention of S, just to confuse you. But he's going to explain the implications of his reductionism about persons. I want to avoid using the term personal identity because that word identity requires a one-to-one relationship when he says that's not what matters. What matters is relation R. Okay, so if you believe that what matters is relation R, if you believe that the case of my division, where you have both righty and lefty, is double success and not the equivalent of death, what implications does that have for this theory that he was criticizing in the earlier parts of the book? But first of all, he introduces this term that comes up a lot in discussions of Parfit, criticisms of Parfit. And this is, what is the extreme claim? And the extreme claim is a claim about whether we have reason to care about a future individual if the only connection between us and them is not one of personal identity, but is just relation R. And the extreme claim says, if reductionism is true, we have no reason to be concerned about our own futures. Now, he actually says, I don't think that's true. I think the moderate claim is true, which is that our concern about, we do have reason to be concerned about our own futures, but they get less as they, there's a discount rate, as he puts it, that we have less reason to care about versions of us in the farther future. So I have a teenage me has great reason to care about the 20-year-old me, less reason to care about 30-year-old me, less reason to care about 40-year-old me, and so on. It gets discounted. That's what he's going to argue for. Now, why might you believe the extreme claim? So the kind of people who are going to argue for the extreme claim, which again is that we have no, if reductionism is true, if the only connection between me and future me is relation R, I have no reason to care about that person any more than I do about other people. But I have no self-interested reason to care about that person. Because we do make a distinction. I care about other people. You know, unless you're a psychopath, you care about other people, particularly if you have children or, you know, you have loved ones. So you do care about people that you genuinely think of as not you. But this is different from the way that you care about yourself, including yourself in the future. You think you have special, this is normally, not in terms of Parfit. This is outside of Parfit's discussion. We think we have a special reason to care about one particular person in the future, us. We have to take control of that person. Nobody else is going to look at, we shouldn't rely on other people to care about that person. We should be independent, we should be autonomous. That person in the future, we have a special reason to care about. The extreme claim says, if Parfit's right, that person is just like everybody else. We have no special reason to care about that individual. And Parfit says, no, I don't think that's true. Well, why might you believe in the extreme claim? Well, here's a quote from Madel. I looked him up. He just died in 2019. He was in Edinburgh. Because it's funny, there's a lot of people that pop up in Parfit's discussion who were very important, obviously, for this discussion, and then haven't become famous in the way that Parfit did. There's one in particular called Waxberg, who he quotes a lot. And I look up, and if you look up in the back, the only thing that he's quoting is this guy's doctoral dissertation. He was at Princeton and he wrote a PhD thesis. Didn't even write a book. It's, you know, your PhD thesis doesn't necessarily get published. And Parfit read it and was very impressed with it and responds to it. This guy, he's a lecturer at UPenn, and as far as I know, has never published another thing. But, you know, he claimed fame. He's in here. Madel. It is obvious that I have every reason to be concerned if the person who will be in pain, he's imagining someone in the future being in pain. I have every reason to be concerned if the person who is in pain will be me. But it is not at all obvious that I have any reason to be concerned about the fact that the person who will be in pain will have a certain set of memory impressions. It is no clarification to be told in this sort of context that this is all that being me involves. Basically, he's saying finding out that someone in the future stands in relation R to me is not the same, doesn't capture what we want in personal identity. It doesn't make me think that person is me. So therefore, I don't have this special self-concern for them. And Parfit says, well, I don't really have a knockdown argument against the extreme claim. I don't believe it. I believe the moderate claim. But certainly, you know, it's kind of just a difference in intuitions. All right. Now, if the extreme claim is true, then that's an argument against S, because S says, if you remember, you should be rationally concerned that in a time-neutral way. If you remember, S was time-neutral. It says you should be as concerned as your well-being at the end of your life, just as much at any other point in your life. So according to the self-interest theory, you should, for example, save for your retirement. So it makes perfect rational sense to sacrifice now, you know, instead of spending all your money on, you know, drugs and whatever right now that you want to enjoy, you put aside some of that money. And instead of just partying all the time, you study so that you get a degree, so that you get a good job. That makes sense under S, because S says all of your states of being throughout your entire life count equally. It doesn't discount according to distance in time away from you. So according to S, it makes sense to sacrifice when you're now, and it makes sense for you to be cautious. Take care of yourself, according to S. Eat well, because if you don't eat well, you know, when you're old, you'll be a wreck. Don't, you know, destroy your body so that you're in constant pain when you're 80. All of this makes sense under S. You know, why is Parfit criticizing this, you might say? It sounds sensible. Well, if the extreme claim is true, then S obviously collapses, because if the me in the future, I have no reason to care about them, S says I have every reason to care about them, and if the extreme claim is true, then S must be false. I shouldn't care about that person in the future. Now, Parfit says, I believe in the moderate claim, so I can't use that criticism of S. I can't just knock down S that way because I don't believe in the extreme claim. But if the extreme claim is true, and I haven't got a knockdown argument that it isn't true, then S is obviously defeated. However, the moderate claim also produces an argument against S. And it says it's an argument against S and in favor of the revised self-interest theory. And the revised self-interest theory says this: a rational person's dominant concern should be for his own future, just as S says, but he may now be less concerned about those parts of his future to which he is now less closely connected. As Parfit says, he has a discount rate to his future. So the difference is, instead of saying no reason to care about the future, as the extreme claim says, the moderate claim says, you have a discount rate. You have steadily less as time goes on. And the argument for that is this, on page 313. My concern for my future may correspond to the degree of connectedness between me now and myself in the future. In other words, the strength of relation R, how much, how close that person is to me. How does that person remember everything that I'm doing right now, or just the high points? Does that person have the same personality as me now, or have they matured? Do they listen to classical music now instead of, rap and rock music? Do they like to stay in? Do they do gardening, for God's sake? If they're different from me to that extent, I have less of a reason to care about them. Connectedness is one of the two relations that give me reason to be especially concerned about my future. Connectedness is the direct memories, and remember, continuity is the chain of direct memories. It can be rational to care less when one of the grounds, connectedness, obviously that person is a continuation of me because they remember being themselves a year ago, and they remember themselves being a year ago. So there's strong chains of connectedness going back, but there's less direct connectedness. When one of the grounds, connectedness, will hold to a lesser degree. Since connectedness is nearly always weaker over long periods, you forget stuff, I can rationally care less about my further future. Now, so what the revised self-interest theory seems to say is that I shouldn't necessarily care about old me. So that seems to say, there's nothing wrong with me smashing up my body. Do I want to try and emulate Tony Hawk? Do I want to drive without a seatbelt? It's a pain in the ass to put the seatbelt in. Or do I want to eat right? No, I want to eat everything. I want to splurge. I want to clog my arteries with stuff because I enjoy eating so much. I don't want to regulate my life for the good of future me. In your 20s you can, or certainly in your early 20s, you can eat more or less anything and bounce back. But what you don't know is that it's accumulating, and it'll mean that in your 30s you're fat and out of shape and wheezy, and to get back to that shape requires a lot more work, and eventually it's impossible. So according to S, you should always be prudent. You should always treat your body right. You should save money and so on. But according to the revised self-interest, you can weight your current interests as way more important to future use, because future use isn't 100% you. That's the theory of identity that we've rejected. There is no thing that remains unchanged, and therefore it's only it's you to a lesser degree, so you can care less about them. So the effect of Parfit's reductionism is to allow for greater imprudence. So here's a criticism of that. The criticism says, so are you saying that a child taking up smoking is okay? Normally we would say to this child, don't do that because you'll regret it later. But what the child, if the child is some kind of child prodigy who's read Parfit, can rightfully say is, no, I won't regret it later. Somebody who is loosely related to me, to a lesser degree, about whom I care rather little, they'll be sad that I did this, but too bad. So it's a bit like, the you in the future is about a bit like a neighbor you don't really care about. Should you play your music loud if you really enjoy it? Well, your neighbor will be pissed off, but you don't like that person. You don't care. That person hasn't got much in common with you, so you don't really care about them. You're going to play your music. The you in the future is a bit like that. So this looks like a bit of a criticism, because we think it would be bad if children started smoking just for the hell of it. Because and now, according to this theory, we can't say you shouldn't do them in the rational, prudential sense of should. But what Parfit says is, yes, that's true, but we can replace the rational, prudential sense of should with the moral sense of should. So just as, to return to my neighbor example, there's no rational sense of should in which I can say to me, somebody could say to me, you shouldn't play your music loud because you'll regret it as your neighbor, because there's no connection between me and the neighbor. But still, somebody could say, you shouldn't play that because it's immoral. You should take the interest, morally, you should take other people's interests into account. You should care about them, not in a selfish way, in an unselfish way. And that's what Parfit means when he says the immorality of imprudence. So in other words, instead of talking about prudence, saying you shouldn't do that for your own good, we talk about morality and say you shouldn't do that because you should care about other people's goods, including that old you in the future. So just because I don't have a self-interested reason to care about the person in the future, to the extent that we think I should care about that person in the future, Parfit says it's because we're committed to impartial morality. So now, notice what Parfit is doing. He's saying most people make this hard distinction between what we should do for ourselves, being selfish, and that's rationality, versus morality, which is, like your vegetables. Rationality is like the good stuff. I want to do what's in my own self-interest. That's fun. And then, but you've got to eat your vegetables too. You've got to be nice to other people. And what Parfit is saying is, my theory kind of dissolves the difference between the two. Because now the you is a much smaller, shorter-lived thing. The thing that you have real close connection with doesn't last 80 years. It lasts 10 years, maybe 5 years. That's the part that that is really just like you, where connectedness holds very strongly. Given that you have less reason to be selfish, you actually have more reason to care about other people. This is what he says at the beginning of chapter 13, where he gives this famous analogy of a glass tube that I've never quite understood, where he says, is the truth about personal identity not being 100%, but being this relation R, depressing? Some may find it so, but I find it liberating and consoling. When I believe that my existence was such a further fact, there's 100% me or not me, I seemed imprisoned in myself. My life seemed like a glass tunnel through which I was moving faster each year, and at the end of which there was darkness. There's like 100% me, 100% me, death, 0% me. When I changed my view, the walls of my glass tunnel disappeared. I now live in the open air. There is still a difference between my life and the lives of other people, but the difference is less. And this is what he's pushing. The difference is less because there's almost the same difference between you and other people as there is as you now and you in the future. So just if you're going to care about you in the future, that means you should care about you in the future in exactly the same way that you care about other people. So this should drive you to be good to other people in the same way that you would be good to yourself. So if you're a selfish person, you should help other people a lot. Because if you care a lot about you aged 80, well, you aged 80 is just like other people in terms of their relationship to you, so you should care about them too. So his theory is kind of diminishing rationality and replacing it with morality, with our duties to other people. And That's chapter 14.